Welcome to the American Intelligence Media. I'm your host, Thomas Paine, Douglas Gabriel, and my guest today is Michael McKibben. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Well, you have come up from the mines, and it is incredible. For the last 3 weeks, you've just been like some kind of crazy gnome throwing gold chunks and diamonds and precious metals over your shoulder into the bucket, bringing them up to Betsy, and Betsy's been putting it out on Truth News headlines as conclave notes. And if anyone has been following them, you should have been shocked and rocked every single day by the revelations coming out from the research of Michael McKibben, Americans for Innovation, Leaders of Technology, and all of those hundreds of people who do this work that put it together and share it with us. And we're so lucky that they do. And I'm so lucky because I get to talk to Michael, one of the lead researchers of all of them, and we get to do mind jamming on what's next. So we had Serco month, and you and your gang of bloodhound miners pulled up so much gold, it changed the entire price of gold in the whole world. And so Serco, during the month that you focused on them, is going bankrupt. And now you've been focusing on the mother group of Cambridge Analytica, and one of their mother group, SCL, Strategic Communication Laboratories, is going bankrupt. And now you have gotten so deep that you figured out what was behind both Serco and SCL and the patent ripoff and the whole thing. So I'm just going to sit back and listen to what you have to say and watch it like a movie, because for the last 3 weeks, you have absolutely rocked the conclave. We've just been waiting for these amazing reports, which are now out on Truth News headlines, Americans for Innovation, and you're getting ready to do, some of your friends are getting ready to do a press release, I guess. And so it's going to go out to the world along with this audio. So can you just tell us what in the world you have uncovered?
We've uncovered confirmation of everything that you and Betsy have been sharing for the last month, that in my mind, there's no question that Spygate was driven from the United Kingdom out of the Privy Council through its one of its members, Sir Geoffrey Pattie, who used to be the CEO of Marconi before they merged with British Aerospace and became BAE. And he's closely associated with Lockheed Martin, with the, as I mentioned, the Privy Council. He's a knight. He has been in all the right places in technology ever since the 70s, or the 60s, I would say. And it's very clear that he may be, it's not inaccurate probably to call him England's top warlord, because he has combined skills in advertising, which gets into mind control. He led the privatization of British Telecom, which goes back to the days when I lived in the UK. And we started looking at all these organizations that were created out of the privatization of many of the British industries, and that became the genesis of the Queen's Golden Share. So even though these companies were privatized and stock was sold in these companies, the Crown never gave up control of these organizations. And Sir Geoffrey was then made Minister of Industry and Trade, and he was actually the keeper of the Queen's Golden Shares, overseer. And then following his political career as Minister of Industry and Trade and also Ministry of Defense, he was invited to become a member of the Queen's Privy Council, which is basically her advisors, and then was made a knight, and then began a march to privatize, or to develop companies to essentially cash in on all these connections that he had. And then there is a very clear link in all that activity to the senior executive service in the United States, and especially Serco, which just to give you an example, Serco was just given a $610 million contract to manage FEMA Region 9, in addition to the fact that they now process all of our patents in the United States. They manage 56 of our aircraft or
air
control towers,
yeah.
air traffic control towers in the U.S., and it just goes on and on. And they're heavily involved in this development of 5G. They're involved in our naval warfare strategies in the U.S. They have massive contracts, probably totaling about $6 billion that's on the books. So it just goes on and on. So clearly the link between Cambridge Analytica and Sir Geoffrey is 100%. And so therefore we then can see that all of these machinations that are occurring in the media are all rolling up to Sir Geoffrey and the Queen's Privy Council. I'll stop there.
It sounds to me like Sir Geoffrey Edwin Pattie is like Mr. Evil, or he's like the evil dude in a James Bond movie who really does have his fingers in everything. And so it's not a joke. I can't think of anybody that would be equivalent to Sir Geoffrey Pattie in America or the world, though I think if I combined a bunch of people like George Soros and Robert Mueller and James Chandler and Andrew Marshall and about every, the biggest evil people I can and rolled them into
good
one.
Set of choices.
So is this guy's real? I mean, does this guy tell the Queen what to do, or does the Queen tell him what to do, or how's that work?
Well, obviously we don't know what we don't know, but it appears that he is the go-to man for intelligence, for defense, for mind control, for the control of the narratives of the BBC, independent television, all the media in the UK. And then because of all of his interrelationships with the senior executive service in the U.S., it's clear that these people are involved in the control of the U.S. media as well.
Well, you've also discovered that they were involved in Brexit, and now there's going to be probably another Brexit vote because the Strategic Communications Laboratories, SCL, a company that, of course, Sir Pattie, let's call him Patty Cake, can we? All these British names are a little much for me. So Patty Cake.
I'm going to call him Sir Geoffrey. I lived in the UK, so I've gotten used to these titles, and even though he doesn't deserve the accolades, let's just stick with the current moniker.
So, Sir Geoffrey or Sir Pattie?
Sir Geoffrey.
Sir Geoffrey.
That's the way
So, Jeff. I'll just call him Jeff. You can
That's
call him
because you're an irreverent American.
I'm irreverent American. I love Britain. I've been there many times. I've been in Europe many times. I love all that, but I'm also not stupid. So when I see someone ripping off America, and I realize now that the globalists actually have a very major seat in the city of London, and that it's directly connected to ex-intelligence people, ex-defense people.
Right.
And when we can see that her Privy Council, or the people on this group that even affected our own presidential election, but also affected 60 other elections in 100 elections in 60 other countries, 44 elections in America.
That's on their website.
That's all on their website. They brag for as being counter-propaganda, intelligence, mind-bending, mass deception.
No, it's clear to me. Let's just cut to the bottom line. It is very clear from their own information that these people have been responsible for the deaths of millions of people in the last 20, 30, 40 years.
Well,
directly.
Just like Andrew Marshall, the man I mentioned, who used to work in the Office of Net Assessment, but he also led the Highlands Forum, which turned into the Highlands Group. They sit around and decide what weapons will be made, how they will be deployed, who they will be used on, and what theaters of warfare will happen so that they can use these weaponized inventions, which are usually stolen from the patent office and then turned into weapons. Now, Sir Geoffrey, Jeff, my boy Jeff over there, he is also in control of Lockheed Martin, because Serco somehow controls Lockheed Martin, our first or second largest military contractor in America, which has the largest intelligence agency, which is just merged with another international group called Leidos. And so We have a mess. We have been completely infiltrated, and I don't care that they're part of Five Eyes.
That's correct.
That eye needs to be poked out because they just interfered with our election. They're trying to depose a sitting president. That is a coup.
Well, Five Eyes, for those who don't know, is a cooperative intelligence operation between America, Canada, the UK, New Zealand, and Australia. Essentially the Commonwealth plus the U.S. And the more I see what's going on in London, the more I realize they think of us as the fifth member of the Commonwealth involved with Five Eyes. And so what happens there is these intelligence agencies all share activities, and that's the way they skirt all of our privacy and security laws in any one country. And so it's highly illegal what's going on.
And
it's immoral. I mean, it's just totally immoral. It's evil.
And many of these people who are in top positions in Britain, like the head of their NSA, the SIS, I guess they call it, Robert Hannigan, after President Trump was elected, he stepped down 3 days later. We have Alexander Downer, who gave the information to get all this nonsense started, and a friend of Hillary's made sure that Hillary got $27 million from Australia. He was in London when all of this was manipulated, and the framing of Papadopoulos and the framing of Carter Page and the attempted framing of Sam Clovis and the entire mess. Actually, every bit of it, it goes back to either people who are working in Britain or British people that go right up to the Privy Council. The aide-de-camp of the Queen is involved in SCL. It's absurd.
Can I just throw out a few facts here?
Mm-hmm.
Cambridge Analytica is the subsidiary company of SCL Group, which was originally Strategic Communications Laboratories Group, which was a Sir Pattie creation, Sir Geoffrey creation. And one of their subsidiary projects was Cambridge Seminars Institute, which you can go see their website right now. And we dug into the corporate records of that organization, and who did we find on the directors list other than Sir Richard Dearlove, who is the MI6 chief, which is the British equivalent of the CIA, and Stephen Halper, who is being paid both by the British and by the U.S. We've found his contracts in the GSA list. He's got over $1 million in contracts to do basically various forms of mind control studies that they're obviously using as a psyop, and specifically they obviously are targeting our president. It's clear from the records.
Well, I'm going to throw out some names that you have helped us find. SCL has on its group the Strategic Communications Laboratories that interferes in elections and basically controls who runs what nation. Lord Ivar Mountbatten, the Queen's third cousin, is involved in these crimes. You have Rear Admiral John Tolhurst, the aide-de-camp to the Queen, previous member of Parliament, previous defense minister, completely complicit. Sir James...
He would be a colleague of Sir Geoffrey also.
Oh, of course.
He held the same position.
Exactly. Tolhurst followed in his footsteps and is probably being trained, to be his lieutenant, his next in line. Then you have Sir James Allen Mitchell, who also, I have here a note that he may even be in the Privy Council also. You have Gavin McNichol, who founded Eden Intelligence, another corrupt group. You have then the connections of them directly through Nigel Oakes, the founder of Behavioral Dynamics Institute, and Alexander Nix, the ones who came up with this mind-bending counter-propaganda.
Well, Oakes is an interesting character. He was a director in SCL, and he actually told The Guardian in 2006 when they relaunched the Security Communication Laboratories, Inc., that his job was mind-bending for political purposes. So he admitted that they're into mind control.
They even say mass deception. They call it behavior research, behavioral change programs, counter-propaganda. It is basically It's a psyops, and they're very proud.
That's what they say. He actually admitted that in the same interview, that they are a psyop group. They're the first private psyop group in the world. That was the way he advertised himself.
And they say they're the first ones to use cyber warfare in commercialism and for elections. And the reason that they are going bankrupt, or at least being charged with all kinds of things.
Don't be fooled by that. I know you're not. But
not because of you, I'm not.
There are 75 or 80 different entities that are controlled by Sir Geoffrey. And SCL USA is just one of those. So these bankruptcies are all just narratives. They're not going bankrupt.
Now
they're just shifting to another entity.
That's right. You've pointed that out. And I mentioned to you when you discovered that they were going bankrupt, I said, well, let's quickly look and find what company they're going to go to next. And you found like 50 companies.
Well, the usefulness of these bankruptcies is because third-party auditors are generally called in. Even if they're corrupt, they have a difficult time not disclosing certain things like who are creditors, and those creditor lists that are just now coming out in the last month are gold because they're showing all the relationships of these entities to each other and to various companies in the U.S., in the U.K., in Europe, and it's all the same suspects that we see tied up with the SES.
Oh yes, absolutely, and tied up.
And also the ones that stole our social networking invention. So it's all becoming clear.
That's the point. The IP theft is the theft of the most powerful weapons ever made. And these are weapon dealers. These are arms dealers. These are people who weaponize things. These are warlords. Now let me mention a few other warlords. How about Andrew Wood is the one who is the ambassador, the British ambassador to Russia, who told John McCain about the dossier and made sure to provide him a copy of it. So Andrew Wood had a copy of it. Then
is he Sir Andrew Wood?
Yes, Sir Andrew
Wood.
Yes,
he is, sir.
Me. Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't give him his proper
Sir Andrew. You have to be formal.
Sir Andrew. Well, if these are
sirs...
Yeah,
you're going to say Andy, I know.
I'm going to come up with another definition for what the word sir means.
Yeah, isn't that coincidental that he was the Russian ambassador and that this Russia narrative against President Trump is emerging out of SCL?
Oh, what a coincidence, Michael. That is such a coincidence.
Yes, it is.
And then it's such a coincidence that John McCain sent his person who runs his institute, the McCain Institute, that he says he has nothing to do with, which is a big lie.
They love these institutes, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
These names just keep popping up.
He personally sent David Kramer, the head of that institute, over to get a copy of the dossier from Andrew Wood that then he personally handed to Comey, not knowing, I guess, that Comey had created that dossier and had paid for that dossier through Fusion GPS and through the $12 million through the Democratic National Committee and all that. Anyway, let's go back here. Sir Richard Dearlove, the ex-head of MI6, who of course is best friends with Sir Geoffrey Pattie, he was the one who threw out the entire dossier scandal.
Well, more than best friends. He's a director on Cambridge Seminar Institute. These are unbelievably corrupt relationships here that attacked our president.
In my sarcastic way of looking at it, you have best friends forever, and then you have bunk buddies. These guys are bunk buddies, okay? Sir Richard Dearlove, the ex-head of MI6, gave explicit instructions to Christopher Steele of Orbis Intelligence Services, which created which took all the, but to tell the story, when you say the Trump Russian dossier, you also have to say the Cody Shearer dossier, you have to say the Sidney Blumenthal dossier, you have to say the John Podesta dossier, the Hillary Clinton dossier, the James Comey dossier.
Can I stop you again?
Please.
One of the things that was baffling to me, and I never wanted to dig into it, is all these this twisted web of interconnections related to the story of the Russian narrative and how so many people from all over the planet were involved. Well, it's now clear from just looking at all of their corporate records of how all these institutes and all these limited companies and how all these incs in the U.S. are connected together. One of the ways these people have hidden from public view is they create so many intertwined companies and relationships that nobody wants to take the time to figure it out, so they get away with it. And what we're seeing emerge now is the names of the people associated with all of these organizations, and they have been planning on and have been actively involved with each other for decades. We just didn't know it because most of us on Main Street were trying to do job and do real work and create real value. We weren't spending all of our time like they do, polishing the brass in their various meetings. And that's exactly what's going on here. We can see now the names and how they're all connected, and it's very clever because it does put off most people from wanting to spend the time to figure out what they're doing. But you have forced us to do that. Thanks a lot, Douglas.
It wasn't my fault. I met you, and unfortunately, here's the analogy I give. Do you know The Lord of the Rings?
I've seen the movie, yeah.
Okay.
And read the book.
There's mines called the Mines of Moria. And they dug so deep that they hit the most precious metal in the world, but at the same time released the Balrogs, these monsters. And you, the Grey Wanderer, Gandalf, had to fight the Balrog and go all the way down into the bottom of the Mines of Moria before you could be transformed and become Gandalf the White. But you had to fight that monster. And now you have literally squared off with the most evil person that I can actually think of, perhaps in certainly modern history. And you've written these reports. And these reports will now...
It's a team of people, by the way, so it's not just me.
Correct. I don't even know how many, but a bunch. So the point is that you have written these reports that explain these things and then you give the evidence that go along with them, indictable evidence, not nonsense, not quoting CNN or quoting stupid articles. We're talking about indictable evidence, signatures, the proof. Then,
yeah, it's called judicially recognizable evidence.
And you've named the people. And so these people that I'm naming, go to the article, Truth News Headlines or Americans for Innovation, and read these, and you're going to see the best versions that have come out so far. We have been yelling about some of these things, but we did not have the evidence underneath the words. So Sir Richard Dearlove controlled Chris Steele and Orbis.
Most definitely.
And his buddy, Chris Burrows. Now, just like the rest of them, Orbis Business International has two other dummy companies, so as soon as the one goes dead, they just shift over. That's what it always happens. So Andrew Wood, let's go back to him, and John McCain. Well, he's the British ambassador to Russia, but guess who his good friend is? Victoria Nuland and Jonathan Weiner. And they are very good friends and worked with Andrew Wood, and it was out of Victoria Nuland's recommendation that supposedly John Brennan got a telephone call from Estonia that said that Trump is working with the Russians. Supposedly that's the nonsense. No, here's what really happened. Robert Hannigan, the head of Britain's SIS, basically their NSA, came over and met with John Brennan, the head of the CIA at that time, and they worked, the GCHQ came over and worked out of Fort Meade, Maryland, to spy, physically wiretap Trump Towers. And that included the meeting with Natalia Veselnitskaya and all those people.
The Ukrainian lady, right?
Yeah, the Ukrainian Russian. She's actually a Russian spy. The Magnitsky Act. Victoria Nuland had to have permission, and the entire State Department had to give permission for her and two of the people she came into this country with because they were on the no-enter list. And so she was allowed to come in, and that was a set-up meeting that they used Robert Hannigan, the head of basically Britain's NSA, out of our own Fort Meade, Maryland, the head where our NSA is, to spy on Trump's election.
Isn't this exhausting just talking about it?
It's unbelievable. I've been talking about it for so long since it happened.
Yes, you have. You've got the details down. But the point is, these people are all beta followers.
Oh, yeah.
They all get together in these huge meetings. We just found another company that Sir Geoffrey started in '95 that's got 75 people that have been or are directors. And it includes people from all over the Commonwealth. And it's really clear what's going on here. most people are sucking up to the royalty in England, to the SES in England, in the U.S., who are our royalty, and they follow. They do what they're told. And so you've got all these interconnections. They've got lists of thousands of people that they can go to get this activity buried. And what you've done is you've figured it out. And I think that what we've got to do is the moral people of the world have got to stand up and say, no more, these people are done.
Actually, I'm not going to let you give me the credit for that. We figured it out. When you and I get on the phone with our computers and we start asking questions and going, well, if that's possible, is this crazy thing possible? And you look it up and you go, oh, Lord, here's some evidence that shows that it's more than possible.
Right.
It happened on this date.
These people, all they know how to do is spend the money of Main Street to shift their paperwork around, to play the markets, to push out propaganda that drives markets up and down all over the planet. They know that in advance, so they buy the stocks. They buy low and sell high as they trigger markets to go up and down. That's all these people know how to do.
Yeah,
and they make money. They make lots of money in the process. But I am absolutely sick of it. This is just the immorality here, the evil here is just off the charts. We've got to stand up. The moral people of this world have got to stand up and say, this is no more. We cannot allow this to happen.
Well, you're helping that happen. You're helping that happen. What you're doing, your case of leader technology, let's go to that in a minute. Let me finish up what I was saying here. SCL.
I get exhausted listening to the details.
Let me go back.
Sorry.
Let me go back and say, yeah, it wears us out having to preach this stuff until we're blue in the face, and then finally, even the mainstream media now is picking it up. So we have been vindicated, and we are so happy that we're just sitting back and rejoicing. Now, one thing I want to make perfectly clear: Cambridge Analytica and its mother company, Strategic Communications Laboratories, SCL, which is basically saying Sir Geoffrey Pattie.
It is not basically, it is Sir Geoffrey.
Mm-hmm. Uses bribery, extortion to win, to topple elections and even topple people who have been elected, but their favorite tool is sexual scandals. And that's what the dossier was supposed to be. And let me remind the listeners, the dossier...
that's an old technique. KGB used it. The CIA's used it. It's anybody in the spy business knows that's just standard fare.
That's right. So they used that against Trump, and it didn't work because accidentally BuzzFeed printed it. It was never supposed to be printed, or no one was ever supposed to have it in their hand because it was all lies. Anyone who'd read it would know that it was lies, and an idiot wrote it. But it was Sir Richard Dearlove who told Christopher Steele,
who works for Sir Geoffrey Pattie,
how to send it through Alexander Downer and how to set up these people with a Maltese professor, Joseph Mifsud, Malta, the island of Malta, the Knights of Malta.
There are quite a few Maltese academics on these various Sir Geoffrey organizations.
He has disappeared because they're saying he was the Russian who tried to give Russian stuff to Papadopoulos. He's not a Russian. He is a British spy. And not only is he a British spy, he is a Maltese spy. And he teaches from the University of Maltese in what's called the... there's a campus in Rome that is an extension of the Maltese University, which does nothing but train intelligence agents. And he and this whole group of people all work out of there. And that's where they also worked. London and Rome. And Malta was in between. Right. So let me explain that. Everybody wants to tell you. The world is controlled by the Vatican and or the Knights of Malta. The City of London and or the British Crown. And Washington, D.C., which is basically the military arm of the UN. That's really not that far from the reality, because the Queen takes a vow of fealty to the head of the Knights of Malta. Now, that's not a myth. That's a reality. And they hide under the auspices of a charity. So I said that to show that we are, in fact, demonstrating that some of the biggest conspiracies you've ever heard in your whole life actually have reality behind them. And they oftentimes hide behind a charity. But
well, the word conspiracy is essentially, as we know, was developed after the JFK assassination, and it itself was a psyop. It's been a very successful one because all you got to do is scream conspiracy, and nobody will listen after that. But what we're seeing is that these advertising guys coming out of the City of London, who are quite skilled, have learned that it doesn't take much to completely sway a society. Just a couple of phrases, like conspiracy theory, like white privilege, racist. It doesn't take much. Once you figure out what the trigger word is, you just keep using it over and over again. These guys are good, but we're onto their game.
Well, that's the reason they called Trump a misogynist, racist,
right? Whatever.
Sexist.
No, just
the litany.
Words.
Yeah. Now let's just say two more things, and that's that there's a group called Hackluit, and Stephen Halper, who is a British and an American citizen, and I say there should be no such thing as dual citizenship because this is the reason that we have these problems. But anyway, everyone knew that Stephen Halper was so corrupt that he had to move to Britain to hide the fact that he had opened and was the head and the chairman of Palmer National Bank of Washington, D.C., George Washington National Bank, and the National Bank of Northern Virginia, all totally corrupt CIA banks. Palmer Bank shuffled all the money for the Iran-Contra scandal through it. Why isn't he in jail? Why is he being paid well over $1 million for being a spy who was a British citizen working against our election? That makes that extremely illegal. It also makes it illegal even if he isn't American because he meddled in the election. He manipulated the election. He used Facebook, and he used Google, and he used all of these different groups. Now let's go to the next point, and that's that Stephen Halper, one of his best friends who he wrote 2 books with was Jonathan Clark, and he is the key member of Hackluit. And Hackluit is another one of these organizations. So if you take these groups that we've mentioned, that is what we should be focused on. That's who the Congress should be having interviews with. That's who the DOJ and the FBI and the CIA should be arresting. But they're not going to. And the reason is because it's institutionalized corruption. We've tried to describe this before with SES, Serco, Crown Agents, USAID, OPIC. But I want to go to one thing, and then I'm going to shut up for a while, and that's that please tell us, how in the world did you figure out that Sir Geoffrey Pattie is the IP theft king of the globe, and that directly relates to what they stole from Leader Technology?
Well, it's vaguely referenced in a few biographies that he was involved with the Intellectual Property Institute in London. Didn't really spend a lot of time looking into the details of that. As you may recall, our patent attorney, Professor James Chandler, started the National Intellectual Property Law Institute in Washington. And it was curious that Sir Geoffrey, in all of his advertising and military and intelligence activities, was also involved with the Institute of Intellectual Property. So we finally started digging into that, and some of our researchers looked in the records at the company's house in London, and kaboom! We started finding that this institute went back to 1981. That by 1983, when Sir Geoffrey entered politics, he was pretty much driving this institute, and quit in 1999 or no 2000, I believe. But basically, this organization, which by the way was disbanded a couple of years ago, was instrumental in driving all intellectual property policy in the UK, in Europe, and we're talking about Sir Geoffrey. He's the founder in 86 of Serco Group PLC. And Serco, is it just a coincidence that having been involved with a parallel organization to our patent attorneys in the UK. He then starts Serco, is involved with the Intellectual Property Institute in the UK, and now Serco, the company he founds, is processing all patents in the U.S. since 2006. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so.
No, that's disgusting.
Yeah, so what we're seeing is the intellectual property strategy of taking over the inventions of creative people in the UK, in Europe. One of his directors started the Intellectual Property Institute in Singapore. As far as I know, is still there. What we're seeing now is that this whole issue of controlling intellectual property all over the planet has been driven from Sir Geoffrey Pattie and our former patent attorney, Professor James Chandler, for the whole planet.
And as you pointed out, Sir Geoffrey is not limited by that nasty, noxious document called the U.S. Constitution.
Right.
Explain that
right.
for people.
This has all been driven out of, it's pretty clear to me now, it's been driven out of the UK, not the U.S., and that the dismantling of our intellectual property laws has been an active act from the early 90s by Professor Chandler and the FBI and the NEC, the NSA, the CIA, to figure out a way to continue to get new ideas flowing into the patent office, stick them in a basket, rumble through them, get the ones they want to weaponize, destroy the lives of the inventors who came up with it, and feed it to their military-industrial complex companies and move on. And you know, when we talk about Wall Street and Main Street, I think that you've got to put Wall Street in there, because Wall Street figured out that those are the companies that they want to fund, and that's the ones they do fund. And so us Main Street inventors have been screwed before we ever got started. That's the conclusion I've come to.
But Michael, has Sir Geoffrey Pattie, as a foreign agent, attacked the United States of America and attack the United States Constitution?
Of course.
Then are we at war with Britain?
Well, I don't know.
Are we? Is this espionage? Is this industrial espionage? And are we? Because these
are we
weapons.
At war? I don't know. It seems like we are in bed with those people. You used the term bunk buddies.
Oh.
I think we've been in bed with them for decades, for sure. We can see that evidence. And it may go back a lot farther than that. I mean, when you get into the banking issues and the City of London and the Rothschilds and what was going on, then it looks like this is a continuum. There's a continuum here that's been going on for over a century at least, probably longer than that. And this is just the latest manifestations of it. So intellectual property has been a key issue for these people to control. And I think I have a theory about that. What I see is you've got people in this world who are creators, inventors, idea people. They don't have time for all these machinations and this paper pushing and this driving of markets up and down and playing the money game and hedge funds. They don't have time for that, because you can't invent if you're doing that. So they got their heads down inventing, and when they come up and they got this great shiny new thing, that's when the vultures start circling. And they play a lot of confidence tricks. The lawyers, there's a group of lawyers and accountants that all play this game of wanting to help entrepreneurs when, in fact, they're just setting them up for the kill. And the whole system is a feeder system all the way down to local attorneys and local accountants to feed this group of thieves who have figured out how to run the planet. And it's totally immoral. The system is run by immoral, evil people. That's my conclusion. And I'm not willing to accept that it has to be that way, frankly.
And what you have discovered is that through the IP, through patents, they not only get a piece of the pie, but they get in early on investing in these companies that are going to have military-industrial complex contracts, guaranteed almost no bid contracts, and then when they go public, they go from being millionaires to billionaires, and you have pointed this out
exactly.
again and again.
That's how we got into. That's how we started investigating all this when we saw the Supreme Court not protect our patent, and then we discovered that all the judges, the federal judges, all the way up to Justice John Roberts, held massive amounts of Facebook stock and didn't disclose it, even though they had a case before them involving Facebook. You know, something is horribly wrong. And now we can see that this not only extends to the Supreme Court, this goes overseas. This gets involved with the Privy Council. So our whole legal system appears to, as you have said many times, be controlled by the Inns of Court in the City of London, not by our justice system, by our Constitution.
Then the next logical question for me is Sir Geoffrey Pattie actually in control of Richard C. Walker's patent, what we call the Internet of Things, back in 1995? What's the name of his company? Vigilant, I think? And Agilent. And they basically created, as you discovered, a
Agilent
patent.
Was in 1999.
1999. So they discovered they created a patent that is going to subsume almost all other patents that have anything to do with controlling anything moving, human beings, data, anything flowing.
Things.
The Internet of
Things.
Things.
The Internet of Things started. That patent started being filed in various iterations in '95, at exactly the same time as Sir Geoffrey was setting up all of these shell companies all over the planet.
Do you think he was in on it from the beginning?
Had been the creator of Serco.
Do you think?
So I think he's using Serco to implement the Walker patents. Yes, I do believe that.
Oh, that's why Serco got the contract for the patents, because... now it makes sense. It was only afterwards, because Sir Geoffrey Pattie was right there from 95, coordinating what you call the Commonwealth of something or another. All the Commonwealth's technology was all focused through him also.
He set up this organization. Let me read you the name of it. Commonwealth Partnership for Technology Management Limited. Company number 3067909. Anybody can go look it up.
So that's kind of how they're going to basically control the world electronically, digitally, and make sure that they have the ability to aggressively remote control everything.
Yes, that's pretty clear.
That's frightening. Then let's give people some hope. What's the way out of this? Well, here's the way out of it. It's only a few people. Let's put them in jail.
Well, people know how to stop things that are electronic. They unplug them. It can be unplugged and unfunded. Boom.
Good point. Do you think that people in Britain who are not allowed to look into the business of the monarchy, and they're actually kind of terrified to hear some of these things because they've not even been able to think about it? We have a few people. There's a guy named the War Economy, a person, I don't know, could be a group, who does a pretty darn good job. We've been posting some of their stuff, and we've been running some videos of people who are quite aware and awake. Not as aware and awake as you have brought forth with your evidence, but at least aware of some of these things. But they start talking about it, and they sound like a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists talking about the Queen being a reptile and being aliens and so on and so forth.
You just used one of the psychological operations terms.
Oops.
See, we've been so programmed to accept the idea that there are conspiracy theories. We can't ever tell when it's not a theory.
That's right. And theories are later often proven to be fact. What we like to do is disprove crazy theories.
Just use facts. That's what I'm about. I'm an engineer. I like facts.
And then we find out that they're not made up. They're just need to be told in a different way, and they need to be framed and put in a historical perspective. And then, there's no knowledge that's isolated from other knowledge. It has to be connected. And if you don't have a way to have a worldview that brings these things into a cohesive whole, then you don't know why there's so much falsehood politics or why we're in the age of untruthfulness.
I've said this to you before, but I lived in England for almost 6 years, and 2 of my children were born there. And there are a lot of There are a lot of people, a lot of British citizens who will give you the shirt off their back. They're very spiritual. They're very moral, and I'm sure they are as sick of this as anyone. And I think that what we've got to call for all over the planet is for moral, spiritual people to step up and unplug this. We've got to unplug it. We can't just let it happen. That's what's got to happen, and it can happen. And this is just technology. Technology can be unplugged.
I believe it will happen, and that's why we work so hard. And I think that's why you and your many, many researchers and all the geniuses, as I like to call them, at Leader Technologies, that you guys and gals work so hard, to keep this narrative moving and to make sure that people have some light shining on some very dark areas where there's a lot.
Well, we put an idea before a request to President Trump, called our Miller Act notice, where we basically are asking the president to pay us for the theft of our technology by the federal government, run out of the executive branch, and pay us for the 17 years of free use of our invention, and then pay us a license going forward. We will then issue a license to everyone on the planet, so everybody that's using social media illegally right now, I'm sure they don't know it, but they are, and we'll provide a license for everybody on the planet to get legal. And then I'm willing to take my money that I receive from that and put that into developing a truly free press and stop this nonsense of psychological operations and brainwashing and all this troublemaking that these people do all over the planet, and to have a truly free press that can start speaking up, because the information that we have uncovered is all out there. And so a case in point here, it's been out there for decades, and yet we don't have a free, independent press that has pulled this data out and presented it so that people can finally have some information that's more than just, as you say, just gut feel and CNN reports and things like this, which is all propaganda. So by having a truly free press, we can start really pushing back as Main Street against all these lies.
Absolutely. Mainstream media supports the second estate, the monarchy, and it does not support the third estate, we the people. And you, as a citizen journalist, and our efforts in the fourth estate are really what is going to create a new day. And it's going to be a new day when, just as you had hoped in the beginning with Leader Technologies when you invented the scalability of social networking, that it's going to be a time when information is free and sets us free.
Right, where we go from strength to strength rather than be destroyed by these I don't know what you call them, rats. They're rats.
They're very greedy people following the seven deadly sins. So
right.
As a member of the Fourth Estate, I salute you. I salute all the good work. And would you please tell the many, many, many people that you are coordinating?
On their behalf, I thank you.
Yes, and I give you our best greetings from the Conclave and from Betsy's team, and just say this is amazing work. Let's do another conversation on this to take it further once we stand back and take a look at the big ugly picture and figure out ways to bring hope to people and to turn off disinformation and bring information that is truly free and liberating for everyone.